Section 6, Chapters 16 through 19. In this section, Clee and I expand on the creative journey and luck, leveling up your art career and self. We also expand a little on redesigning your avatar or self-image, along with facing your creative fears. We go into detail on how the word luck is bullshit, our different approaches to leveling up, and why we believe beyond a shadow of doubt that self-talk is important.
Okay, so let's talk about the creative journey and luck. Luck is such an interesting idea, and I'm glad that you cover it because you always hear these stories of people that got lucky. They were right time, right place. They knew the right people. Their career skyrocketed. And usually those stories completely negate and disregard all the work that person put in.
Right. It really does not cover the years and years and years worth of getting prepared for that moment, and the fact that the only reason that they could have quote unquote considered them lucky was because everything that they did before got them to the place where they were. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to really talk about this, is because a lot of people use that as a crutch, right?
Yeah.
So I've had artists look at me and say like, man, you're so lucky. Like you're able to do these videos and you're able to do this art and like you're able to do this for a living. You're lucky. And although I agree, like, yes, I do consider myself lucky, I also know that luck had nothing to do with it whatsoever, because the only thing that they're seeing is me now. They would not be saying, man, you're so lucky, if they saw me 2 years in and was struggling to do what it was that I was trying to do, or even 3 years in, or even 4 years in, or 5 years in. They wouldn't have called me lucky. But then 10 years in, they're like, hey man, you're lucky.
Or even being able to witness the day-to-day stuff today, 10 years in.
Right.
The stuff that you're doing constantly, pushing forward. In the beginning of this section, and of course it's not really in the audiobook, but you have this chart. And it's basically what I call the reverse bell curve chart,
right,
where like you start something and it follows this reverse bell curve of like best idea ever. And you start and you quickly realize like this may not have been the best idea ever. And it sort of plummets into like, this sucks, I suck, everything sucks.
Yep.
And then it kind of curves back up where you persist. And you keep going at it, and you eventually come around to, like, maybe this is okay, I'm getting there, and so on and so forth until you reach your end goal. And I think with whether you're talking about a piece of art or you're talking about basically your life path,
yeah,
it can look like that, and it's about persistence.
That actually comes from another book that I had read where they talk about the creative process, and I kind of expanded on that a little bit, that concept, because I think that when you're looking at that creative process of thinking like, oh, I have this great idea, I'm going to do this thing, and not only applying it to the projects of art that you're working on or music or whatever project it is that you're working on, but it really has to do with like your life process and the things that you want out of life, that you're always going to reach some kind of resistance with something that you've never successfully done before. Like, it is going to be hard. So, for example, like somebody that's like thinking, I'm going to work out, and this is a great idea, this is fantastic, and then they start doing a little bit, and they're like, man, this sucks, and I suck, and blah, blah, blah. And you have to get through that I suck period.
Where everything looks terrible, you're not seeing any results that look favorable, and there's no reason to keep going except that you've decided to keep going.
Exactly. And I mean, and that's how it works with anything that you are doing in life, including an art project, a specific painting, a sculpture, your entire art career. It is going to suck for about half the amount of time that you are trying to do it. And when you're doing it in the beginning, it just feels like everything is just going wrong, and you're never going to be able to succeed at this thing. But it's those people that hold on past the rejection, past the suckage, past all that stuff, and they're doing it for that internal fortitude. I think that it's the reason that I say, like, don't let money be your motivator, because money's not going to be there in the beginning to hold your hand through the suckage.
No, certainly not.
No, the only thing that's going to be there in the beginning to hold your hand through the suckage is the fact that you're out of your mind. everybody is going to be telling you that you are crazy to be doing this. Why are you even trying this? This is hard. Da 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 da. Nobody else has succeeded in this. And you have to be willing to look at them and say, well, it's because this is what I want.
Absolutely. So I would say if some people have said that we're really lucky, and I prefer the word fortunate. Yes, I feel very fortunate to be
Yeah.
in this position, but I have worked for it every day. And I would say you're not lucky so much as you're ucky. Like
Yeah.
you're in the arena.
Yeah.
You're covered in the sweat and the blood, sweat, and tears, as they say. You're persisting through the suck. You got to be willing to go through the uck
Yeah.
before people call you
That is
lucky.
a great way to put it, because I mean, it's one of the things that I try to express to anybody that wants to do this as a full-time career, right? Because a lot of people, like, they jump in and they're like, oh, I'm going to do this, and it's not that I ever want to discourage anybody, because I think that everyone can do this in whichever iteration of it is that they want, whether or not they want to be doing this full time, whether or not they want to be doing this part time, whatever it is that they want to do with their art career. I believe that you can do that. The thing is that you're going to have to face a lot of resistance in order to get there. So the question isn't whether you can get there. The question is, are you patient, and do you have the will to go through the suck? Are you willing to just go through that period where you're broke and you don't have any money, and you don't it's the same thing with any business, any entrepreneur or any business people that you talk to. It really takes about 3 years to get your business off the ground. And that is with product that already fall into some kind of marketing campaign or something out there that you could jump on board
Where you could
with.
just like sort of create your niche and like hit it hard.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, when you're dealing with art, a lot of people will do, I'm going to give myself a year. I'm going to give myself 2 years. I'm going to give myself 4 years. And it's like, you can't do that. You either are in and deciding this is a lifestyle. It doesn't matter if I have a job, another job to cover the bills or not, but I am an artist and I am embracing this lifestyle.
Absolutely. Looking at our careers, we could have easily have given up year 5,
Yep.
year 6, year 7. Really, at any point, there's always a challenge. And you have the How to Be Anything little image in the
Right.
book. And I love that you chose to represent the How to Be Anything graph as a spiral.
Yes.
Because oftentimes it does seem cyclical, and it does kind of seem sometimes like you're running around in circles.
Yep.
And like even 10 years in, you have high points and then you have real struggles. And what you're not seeing, if you're not paying attention or if you're not aware of this, is you're not running in circles. You are expanding every time you come around.
Right. You're expanding and you're growing out.
Yeah. So even if it seems like you're not getting anywhere, you are.
Yeah.
And so I love that you chose to represent that as a spiraling out.
It's important to realize that journey, that's kind of how it goes. You're constantly taking a step outside of the comfort zone of where you were. Now, if you're not growing, if you're not pushing yourself to do anything different, then yes, you are kind of running around in circles and you know exactly what to expect. And that's security. That's the security blanket that a lot of people search for. But if you are constantly pushing outside of your comfort zone, you are growing, even though sometimes it seems like everything is just still the same. Mm-hmm. It's little minute changes that cause that growth to occur. And I think when a lot of people don't have enough patience to see it, they want the changes to happen right now. I need it to happen right now, right now, right now, right now. They don't even realize that they are pushing and expanding their career because they're in it, because they're expecting some kind of miracle or thing to fall in their lap when they're already on the way to doing those things that it is that they want to achieve.
Kind of like watching Earth orbit the sun. If you could watch Earth orbit the sun, you'd be like, well, this is largely the same
Yeah.
every time. Earth's orbit does change, but I mean over a long period of time.
But
And if you're just watching the orbit, you're like, we're not going anywhere. But what you don't notice is all the changes happening on Earth. In this particular example I'm giving, so what I'm trying to illustrate is even if your trajectory is looking largely the same, you yourself are evolving.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like sitting there and watching a tree grow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could sit there all day and you won't notice it, even though there are minute changes happening every second.
Absolutely. You mentioned just a minute ago that everyone's everyone's going to think you're crazy on this journey. You've embraced the crazy, and you put a little section at the end of this section about creating your own world, being a daydreamer, and
Yeah.
just embracing that. And at first, I was like, how interesting that he stuck this little section here. But I think that it's really fitting to put it here in this section about the creative journey and embracing. Most of us creatives are daydreamers.
Right.
And it talks a little again about imagination and how powerful it is, and the ability and willingness to just create your world how you want to see it, create your story how you want it to be.
Essentially, whatever is going on in your head, whatever bunk stuff you're telling yourself, whatever great stuff you're telling yourself, it's all stuff that is going on in your own head, in your own world, in your imagination. And so, knowing that, especially dealing with a lot of these insecurities that come with that creative bell curve, and having to push through the suck and all that stuff, and understanding that a lot of the stuff that we perceive as not great, suckage, and things like that have a lot more to do with the general perspective of the world and maybe some of the things that you were taught. But hindsight, when you look back at those moments and you kept going and you realize that, like, wow, I did that. I went through that time. There was adversity. It was not easy, but I still did it. When you use your imagination now in that way, where you're able to view yourself in the future in that position, saying like, yeah, this seems like it really, really sucks right now, but there's going to be a day where I look back and I'm like, wow, I did that.
That's a powerful thing. Future me,
Yeah.
looking back, thinking, you came through it just as I always have. Why would I doubt it now?
Exactly. And that's one example of like, yeah, we've got this imagination. Like, let's use it. Use it for good.
Use it for good, use
Yeah.
it to our advantage. And in that spirit, let's talk about leveling up,
Right.
which is always, always going to be a challenge. It's either going to be something you embrace or it's going to be a challenge. You never really get to the point in a creative career where you're like, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna rest here. I mean, I suppose some people might find that an appealing idea to just get to a place where you don't have to grow or evolve anymore. But I don't really think people thrive there.
I mean, I think a lot of us have convinced ourselves that that's the end goal. What is the end goal in most of business? You get in an internship level, you get in the ground floor, you climb your way up to the top of the penthouse, and then eventually once you're there, then you retire because you're older and it's time to retire. Mm-hmm. Well, when you look at an artist, that kind of goes against the grain. I don't think I know of any artist, no matter what age they are, that is thinking like, someday I'll be able to retire. Like,
No.
I'm going to be painting until it is time for me to knock off this mortal coil. I don't plan on having any type of retirement plans because what I do isn't something that I want to retire from. And so, like, I think for a lot of people, it's when you're following the conformity of the mainstream, the way that things go, it's like you have this career, you have your moment in the limelight, and then you just kind of fall away and do your own thing. You get away from it. Mm-hmm. And really, when it comes to the creation, it's not about the limelight. It's not about climbing any corporate ladders or getting any degree of success. It is about consistently being a creator, being somebody that creates something and puts it out in the world. And you have different degrees of success. When you look at any kind of creative career, you have people that Maybe he created a something very, very popular several years ago and then just kind of fell out of the limelight, and then created something popular again 10 years later, or actors that reemerged in their careers, or musicians that wrote a new album that they hadn't been really thought about in 10 years. There's all kinds of reemergence, and it all comes back to the fact that, like, really when somebody's in it because that's what they do, because they're a creator, it's not about getting to the pinnacle and then retiring.
Absolutely not. So you beautifully illustrate what you mean by leveling up with the video game analogy.
Yes.
A video game starts you off at the most manageable level, and then eventually that becomes really easy for you. And if you just played that same level over and over and over for the rest of your time, it would be really boring.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens in a creative career. If you're not moving on to the next level up, it can become stagnant.
Exactly.
Comfort, which we all think that we want, comfort and security easily turns to stagnation when you're not leveling up.
Oh yeah, and it's one of the reasons that I use the video game reference, because I remember playing Super Mario Brothers, right? Mm-hmm. And like the first time I played it and died several times in the first level, and it was difficult, but eventually, like, I knew exactly what to expect. And the level was so simple for me. Back in the day with Nintendo, you can like start over from the place after you reached a certain amount of deaths, so you'd have to start all the way from the beginning.
Yes.
And I hated starting from the beginning once I had gotten like 3 levels in where I was good at the levels, because the first level was just time. Like, I just had to go through it in order to get to the levels that were a little bit more difficult.
Right. Now, here's an interesting thing to note. So it doesn't stress you out in a video game,
right,
to lose lives,
right?
Me as a kid and even an adult, having 3 lives or however many lives they would give you, it stressed me out. I didn't want to lose any of those lives. I was a cautious video game player.
Right.
Which tells you something about the way that you and I both level up.
It really does. The moment that things start getting comfortable, I start to realize that things are becoming easy. Now that level is becoming easy, right? Mm-hmm. So like we started doing the shows, and then after maybe a year or two, like, I was very comfortable. I knew exactly what to expect, even though being an artist, there isn't any real certainty in the career. Like, you're not guaranteed to make money if you go to a show.
Right.
But for the most part, like, I was very comfortable with what I was doing. I understood what I was doing. I understood pretty much what to expect. And, and people were looking at me as a successful person. And then what do? I leave that and go to the next thing.
And a lot of people are like, why?
Yeah.
Why? And you do it quickly and full on.
Yes.
And of course, you explain in the book that I take a more cautious approach. I reduce my commitment to said thing as I'm gradually making my way to the next thing.
Hence, you are hoarding your extra lives.
I am trying to save my extra lives. And it can be more of a challenge for me, but I do it.
Yeah.
And the reason I do it is because I know what it feels like to stagnate and feel like, what am I doing? And the question that you asked, do I want to just do this for the next 20 years? And the answer is no. I don't want to exclusively do this and not level up for the next 20 years.
Now, going back to the analogy of the lives, like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about this, because what I think my perception was back in the day was, especially if I was learning a new video game, mm-hmm. like, I knew that I had 3 chances within the game to figure out how to beat the level, right? And then I would have to start over again.
Right.
And then try and figure out how to beat the level and then start over again.
Uh-huh.
So, like, I always saw the extra lives as just, I could die 3 times as I'm figuring out and taking risks, but I know that I'm going to be able to start the whole game over again. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's one of the reasons that it just didn't stress me out, because I wasn't concerned with beating the level in that one stretch.
And
like,
I think
I had a long-term plan for the game.
I think that's actually the thing that did stress me out, was the idea of having to start over again from scratch.
Right.
And not trusting, like, oh, well, if I get sent back to the very beginning, like, am I going to be able to work my way through all these levels
Right.
again?
Right.
So I think it has a lot to do with self-confidence and how capable you believe you are,
Right.
which is a huge thing to look at, which is beautiful because you don't exactly call it self-confidence, but you go into overwhelm.
Yeah.
And all the stories that we tell, well, yeah, you basically do illustrate that perfectly. All the stories we tell ourselves about unchangeable past or uncertain future events that sort of paint our picture of
Right.
who we are and what we're capable of.
Right.
And you describe it as like, those overwhelming thoughts can have you just bobbing in place at the beginning of the game.
Right.
And what a boring game.
What a boring game that would be. Like, I picture like those moments where I'd be playing a video game with my brother, because anybody that plays video games knows that at some point you become the voyeur. You're the one watching the video game as somebody else is taking all the risks.
Yeah,
right?
I often was, yeah.
Because it's fun. It's fun, and you get to be the side seat driver. Like, go to the left.
Yeah.
But I remember like sitting there and watching my brother one day, and he was really undecided in which direction he was gonna head. And so his character was just standing there doing this weird bob. And I was like, are you going to go anywhere? Like, what are we doing here? It was so boring. But whenever I think of that, like the fact that like your fear of the stuff that happened in your past and, what might happen in your future and how all of that is wrapped up into one. The only experience that you've really had is what was going on in the past. And depending on how it is that you view that, if you're viewing it in a negative way, if you're viewing it as somewhere where like you failed miserably or like you can't do this or you can't do that, it has a direct effect on you right now in the way that you see your future.
Absolutely. Even something like telling yourself, well, I don't know where I'm I don't know where to go, like your brother said.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one because that's something that I've used. Like I would wait for opportunities to present themselves to me and I would often take those opportunities. But as far as like just making a decision, like
Right.
this is the next step for me. Oftentimes I'd be like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what the next level is. And that's even a story that we tell ourselves.
Yeah, because that story is wrapped up in the insecurity of being afraid of making the wrong decision.
Right. And you said just pick something, right?
Yeah.
Just pick a direction.
Just pick a direction. Just go that way. Go left because you are not going to find out whether or not left is the road for you if you're just standing there.
Absolutely.
You got to go left, and then if you realize like, oh, left sucks, then take a right.
Absolutely. But definitely the story of, oh, well, I'm not the kind of person who's good at figuring out the next thing is part of that whole self-image, which is beautiful because then you go into redesigning your avatar.
Right.
Which what you mean is your self-image.
Yeah.
How you see yourself. And I define it as what you regularly tell yourself you are and what you regularly tell yourself you're capable of. And this is hugely important because this is the stuff that makes up the statements, I'm just not the kind of person who fill in the blank.
Exactly.
I'm just not the kind of person who has that sort of persistence. I'm just not the kind of person who can deal with people. I'm just not the kind of person who makes it in this industry. It's all tied up into who you're seeing when you're thinking about yourself, who you define yourself as.
I think a lot of us think about our self-image, right? But I don't think many of us stop to really pay attention to the words that are coming out of our mouth, right? You hear self-talk a lot, but even in conversation with someone else, there's a lot there that will allow you to really take a look and see what your self-image is. Mm-hmm. And not only the words that are coming out of your mouth, but when you take that moment to stop and think about you in your own brain, what is the image? What is the coloration? Is it black and white and dismal? Are you sitting in some corner and you're sad? Are you standing up powerful and strong, or are you kind of slumped over? Like, we all have this image in our mind of ourselves, and a lot of us don't stop to take a look at that self-image and see if that is exactly how it is that we want to view ourselves. It's almost like many of us think that, well, that's our self-image and that's just how it is. Not realizing that you could redesign that avatar. You could redesign yourself. You could reinvent yourself and be whatever it is that you want to be. A lot of our self-image is wrapped up in statements that we heard growing up, where parents talked about themselves or people identified you as, Clee's really good at this thing, and then saying like, oh, Clee, you're not any good at that. Da 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 da.
Oh,
da,
definitely.
And then buying into those things
and accepting them. A lot of people think that's just how it is, and a lot of people think that it doesn't have much bearing on other things like what you do, but I think it's everything. And we've started really investigating this again recently and talking about it. I mean, it's always kind of something that we think about, but I've started really looking at my self-image recently and realizing, like, although I'm very strong in a lot of areas, if I read the actions between the actions, I have work to do on my self-image as far as, do I trust my own judgment? Am I someone who I think makes good judgment calls? Do I think I'm capable? Am I the hero of my own story, or am I a side character in it?
Right.
And all of those things are tied up in that based on stories that we tell ourselves repeatedly. And I love that you have this brain hack, if you will, of like, look, your brain is amazing, but it's really easy to trick your brain.
Yeah.
The thing is that we just don't use that to our advantage. Basically, you trained yourself to have your self-image through repetition.
Yeah.
And you can rewrite it through repetition, and your brain won't know the difference.
Exactly.
It's just repetition. So basically what you're saying is, if you start repeating empowering stuff to yourself, even if it feels really stupid and awkward at first, your brain will eventually be tricked.
Yeah, exactly. Because you tricked your brain into believing whatever it is that you are believing right now.
Right, and that's complete BS.
Yeah, it's complete BS. The only reason that things like that feel awkward, I mean, when you think about how many people have a difficult time looking in the mirror and just looking at themselves and saying, I'm beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? They have a difficult time doing that. They stand in front of the mirror, they do it, and they feel awkward. Well, why? Why do they feel awkward? They think to themselves, well, I feel awkward because I'm not beautiful and I'm trying to lie to myself. No, that's not why you feel awkward. The reason you feel awkward is because you're so used to saying that you're ugly
that you actually believe it.
So saying anything else is awkward. And that's really what it comes down to. Like, a lot of people think that there's this huge convincing thing that I gotta do all these things in order to feel this way, when in actuality, all you gotta do is rewrite that avatar, rewrite that story that you've been telling yourself, because there is so much that we hold ourselves back from being able to feel and do simply because of some lame story that we think is true in our own brain. And the reason that I put everything in this book, but this chapter in particular, is because I did a full 180-degree turn from where I was living. I was miserable. I could not get ahead in life. I could not ever succeed in something. I could never complete a project that I started. I was just not living any kind of life that I wanted to continue in. And in fact, I just had chronic depression and all kinds of, suicidal thoughts and things like that. Mm-hmm. This redesigning your avatar was something that I had heard about, not put specifically this way, but, reinvent yourself, you hear all these, love yourself, reinvent yourself, you could be anybody, all this stuff, right? But it never really hit me what it actually meant. It simply meant that all the stuff that I believe about myself is completely made up. And so the only reason that it's true is because I decided that it was true at some point in time. I made that agreement with myself that this is how I am, this is who I am. You know what? That's just how I am. And not realizing that, like, a lot of those were based on insecurities. Not all of them, but a lot of them were based on insecurities. And so essentially, I was telling myself a story that was keeping me from doing things that would prove to myself that I wasn't those things. So it was like a
Yeah.
self-fulfilling prophecy. And so the moment that I started to redesign my avatar, things started to change. And
Right
then
away?
yeah, well, no, not right away, but like, I mean, certain things started to change. There were some things were easier for me to rewrite than others, right? And then there are those like harder core things that you got to get
The deeper.
you got to get down to the layers. But like what ended up happening was that thing that everybody talks about in magical thinking, where like your life changed, like the world changes. Whatever it is that you think, you could change the world. Well, yes, my entire world view and perception and opportunities changed. Basically, I had gotten to a point where I was able to train myself to see myself in a more positive view, a more empowered view. And because of that, I was able to see the world through a filter of someone who was more empowered, more opportunities would open up, and I'd be willing to take them. There was more positive stuff out in the world because I was empowered. I was no longer a victim, so I wasn't looking at the world through the filter of a victim.
Absolutely, that makes perfect sense. You were different.
Yeah.
You had changed. I would argue that how you see yourself and what you tell yourself and who you tell yourself you are is probably the singular most important thing you can look at
Yeah.
in an art career or in life.
Yeah.
Who are you?
Exactly.
What stories are you telling yourself about who you are and what you're capable of and what are your limitations and what are your strong points and all those things? Look at that, because
And a lot of artists that I've talked to, not a lot, but there have been some artists that I've talked to, is like, well, this isn't relevant to an art career. And it's like, yes, it is, because everything that you're able to accomplish in your art career, whether it is technique, skill, career, money, whatever it is, all of that is part of the story that you're telling yourself. If you are not willing to look at who you are, who you've been telling yourself that you are, and start writing a story that you would much rather hear about yourself and be that person that you want to be right now, then none of the stuff that you do, taking a marketing class, is not going to help you with that. It's nothing that you do is going to get beyond the filters of what it is that you think you are capable of.
yeah, it's like the famous quote that's used a lot, so much that it's cliche, but it's true. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are correct. And that's essentially what they're saying.
Exactly.
What you believe, you're going to show yourself that that belief is correct.
Yes.
So if a belief isn't working for you and circumstances seem to suck, change the belief.
Exactly.
Rewrite the story.
And that's why I call it a self-fulfilling prophecy. Basically, It is whatever it is that you think, that's how it's going to go down.
Let's talk about facing your creative fears. You mentioned that obviously some fears are healthy. Like, you know, don't step too close to that 1,000-foot drop-off.
Yeah, exactly.
Run away from the lion.
Yes. There is a creepy sound in the bush, and it is dark, and you are feeling that tingling sensation up your spine that tells you it is time to run. Then it is time to run. A confrontation with something that you are afraid of is not the issue here. It is the imaginary fear, the thing that isn't actually out in front of you. You're not being chased down by a lion.
Right. And I would argue that the majority, the lion's share of fear is in our imagination. We're worrying about stuff that is all in our head.
Exactly.
We're trying to figure out what we might do if. And you make the argument that that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because like we covered in the section about imagination, if you decide that you're going to face those fears, you have all the capability of facing the fear in your imagination without actually having to live it.
Yeah, exactly. You have the most awesome virtual reality engine in the world, where if you are worried about not being able to pay your bills, then go down that route. Play that video game in your head. Go down that route and face it. Turn to the left and turn to the right and allow your characters, your extra
To fall in the flaming lava pit.
Fall in the flaming lava pit and just play it out until you get to a place where you feel empowered, where you can walk. Okay, well, what if I don't have money to pay that bill? Mm-hmm. What if I'm not able to pay my rent this week? What if I go to the show and I don't sell anything? What if I go to the show and somebody walks up to my art and says that I suck? Being able to face all of these things is so good. Like, those fears are popping up because you have insecurity. Those things that are popping up in your head that you're sitting there and just stewing on over and over and over. Most of the times we're avoiding them instead of just facing those fears.
Give them airtime.
Give them airtime because they're popping up for a reason, because you've got it in you. You're afraid for whatever reason, for whatever reason, and chances are it's not the reason that you think it is.
It's usually not. I think this is so great because when actually confronted with a difficult situation, sometimes I handle it awesomely and I'm totally happy with what I did and said. Sometimes not so much. And hindsight, I'm like, okay, what would I have loved to have said or done in this situation?
Right.
And you learn and you grow from that. So next time, if it presents itself, you're better equipped for it. This is like getting to do that without actually having the confrontation in real life.
Without having the negative experience where you walk away and you're like, okay, I could have done that better next time. You get to actually face it.
Yeah. Play it out.
Yeah.
And you get to figure out, you get to try 10, 12, 20 different things that you might do in response to that situation and then decide which one feels the best.
Yeah.
Which is totally awesome.
Again, I go back to Tesla, being able to work out in his brain the machine and like it failing and doing this and doing that. Without having all the insecurities and the weird tics that Tesla had, he was able to use his mind in an extremely creative way to be able to build these fantastic things and imagine up these fantastic things that didn't exist before he came up with them. But for some reason, like with a lot of us, when it came to the emotional fears and things like that, he didn't realize that he was able to apply that to it.
Sure.
You know how to use your imagination to be able to face these things. The problem is that you use your imagination to just continue ruminating on the same thing over and over and over, so you make no headway. And the more you ruminate, the more that you feel that thing, the negativity of that thing, the more those emotions stack on top of themselves, and the more difficult it gets, only because you've been practicing it. Not because it actually got any worse, but only because you've been practicing it over and over, and those emotions stack on top of each other.
Yeah.
And so it becomes even more fearful. That's why a lot of people won't even venture there in their imagination, because like it's just too painful.
Yeah, I mean, I've known plenty of people that have said, I just could never blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I've had conversations with people where we start talking about a certain subject and they're like, oh yeah, I just don't want to think about that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you're avoiding something, it doesn't make it go away. It's still there. You got to face it. You got to really, really be able to face it. That way, whenever it does pop into your head, you're not afraid of it anymore.
Absolutely. I've had powerful experiential knowledge of this in recent times. There are words that I'm terrified of. Yeah. And those words would just echo around in my noggin. The more I was afraid, the more they would echo around. It kind of makes me sound like a crazy person.
Well, but I think we all are crazy people who are striving to be normal and not understanding that everybody's crazy. There's no normal.
It's true. There's no normal. These words would rattle around in my head to the point where I was trying to push them away so hard that I would literally wake up in the middle of the night with the word loudly broadcasting in my thoughts.
Right.
And I realized, like, I'm going to have to give this airtime.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to. And it was the only thing that helped me move forward in overcoming my fear. Yeah. Was to give it airtime.
I know that things like this, avoiding issues and just kind of stuffing them down inside of yourself, I know for a fact that that is extremely unhealthy, both physically and mentally for us. It is very, very holding that stress on the inside and constantly keeping your mind and your body in a place of stress is not good for you.
No.
Facing those things that are stressing you out, those things that you're afraid of, and saying like, okay, so I'm afraid of this happening. What am I going to do if this does come to pass? And then you go through that fear and you allow yourself to imagine the worst of it, and then maybe a little bit better, and then maybe a little bit better, and then maybe a little bit better. Because like, you got to be willing to go there as many times as you need to go until you've figured out a way that if it does happen, you know what, I think I'll be okay.
Sometimes the fear can seem so paralyzing that just the mere idea of facing the fear and giving it airtime can seem like the worst possible idea.
Yeah.
But it really, like, the only way forward is through.
Yeah.
Play it out. Even horrible scenarios that you might be afraid of, that you just really don't even want to imagine them at all. I mean, it's rattling around in your noggin, so it's there.
And that's the thing, like, all of those things are inner, you know, our brains are this interconnectivity of just neural pathways, and they're all connected to one another in some way, shape, or form. So much to the extent that if you have anything that is not connected to that, right, then it dies off. So, like, if you have negativity, if you have, like, fear, if you have stress running through there, and, you know, that day you were thinking about your family or thinking about something that you actually enjoyed doing, a lot of times you don't even realize how neurally connected those things are until you actually go into that fear and start realizing, like, man, this stuff is kind of attached to a lot of things.
Yeah.
No wonder I'm having such a hard time making a career in art. No wonder I'm having such a difficult time putting myself out there. No wonder I'm having such a difficult time finding someone that I actually want to be with. No wonder I'm having such a difficult time feeling good about myself. Like, all of these things are there, and yes, it's hard, and sometimes it's very painful, but all of these things are always coming up to the surface, and for the most part, a lot of us are just turning away from it because we don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about that. I don't want to think about that. And really, the only thing you can do in that moment is either think about it or constantly be in a place of fear where that thing is going to pop into your mind.
And that's the answer, because we've had countless people say, well, Rafi and Klee, you guys seem to have a lot of aha moments. Like, how come you're constantly having these revelations? And, like, where is this coming from? And it's the willingness to go into the cave.
Yeah. The willingness to go into the cave, not knowing what you're going to see in there, not knowing what you're going to see. And the thing is that, like, yes, your entire world is going to change. We only process like a fraction of the bits of information that we take in throughout life, whether or not you're having a conversation with somebody, whether or not you're looking at a sunset, whether or not you're looking at an opportunity board, right? Whatever way it is that you see the world and whatever things you're afraid of and whichever way it is that you see yourself is all a reflection of the information that you take in and that you don't delete. It is surprising. Whenever anybody loses their keys, the one thing they have to realize is that I highly doubt that your keys actually disappeared. Most likely you deleted them from view.
Yeah.
Because you were so convinced that you lost them that although they were sitting right there the entire time,
You literally don't see them.
you literally don't see them.
It's quite an interesting phenomenon.
And that's because we're all convinced that we see with our eyes and don't realize that we see with our brain. We smell with our brain, we taste with our brain, and we hear with our brain. All we are seeing is vibrations of light. We're hearing vibrations of sound. Basically, we are interpreting a world full of vibration, and we are processing it through our brain. Literally, everything that we see, taste, smell, hear, and touch has to be processed through bits of information in our brain. And either we see the things, we generalize the things, or we delete the things. That's as simple as it is. So whatever it is that you are, that your brain is telling you, like, hey, you've got this fear. Let's think about this. And you're like, no, I don't want to think about it.
La, la, la,
Hey,
la, la, la,
hey,
la.
you've got this fear. Let's think about this. Let's work this out. No, I don't want to think about it. Hey, you got this fear. Let's think about this. Let's work this out. Just work it out. Think
Next
about
thing
it.
you know, it's 3 a.m. and your brain's there with a bullhorn like, hey,
Yeah.
we're going to have to talk about this.
Yeah, and people wonder why they suffer from insomnia and stuff like that. Like, you work your shit out.
Yeah.
Work your shit out because it's not going to go away unless you do.
Yeah, it's true. It doesn't.
All right, well, let's talk about the next thingy then.
We'll level up to the next thingy.
Level up to the next thingy. All right. And that concludes this section of the audiobook. Thank you so much for listening, you guys. If you would like, you can proceed to the next section. Have an awesome day. Adios.